Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Michael, and I'm exploring all the different ways that stationery can bring me joy. I want to welcome you to a very special video because it commemorates my almost year in playing around with stationery, exploring the stationery hobby, and kind of getting started in the stationery world, so to say. While I didn't make this channel until about April of this year, it was around November when I began to get interested in learning more about stationery as a hobby. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I had just gotten married and I had been spending so much of my time wedding planning and getting prepared for the big day that after the amazing day was over, I realized I have a lot more free time on my hands than I thought. And so I had stumbled upon Helen of the Coffee Monsters Co., her TikTok account, and watched some of the amazing things she was doing in her planner, which led me to her YouTube channel, which then led me to other videos being offered up by the algorithm, and that's when I took my deep dive and started kind of skulking in the background of the online stationery community. Perhaps because my husband and I are about to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, my brain just started really thinking about anniversaries and celebrating milestones. 1 year, what does it mean to do something for 1 year? And I decided to use the note pages in the back of my Hobonichi Techo A6 to kind of capture the lessons that I think I have learned, or that stationery or the stationery hobby has been able to teach me throughout this 1-year journey. As a teacher, I love thinking about lessons, and so it only seemed fitting to think about this as the top lessons that I have been taught by this new hobby, interest, and community. And so I went into the back of the notes area. I made a 2-page spread, and I decided to kind of think through what ended up being top 6 lessons might be. The first lesson is how much more organized my life is. Stationery has taught me to really organize all aspects of my life. Up until this hobby, I had definitely been somebody who used stationery to plan for work. And while I'm now in an avec system for work, stationery definitely was already in my life when it came to my work planner. I made a video earlier this year about how I hopped from the Action Day planner that I had been using previously to the new avec system using Hobonichi. And while, because of the nature of my work planning and how it has many personal details about my school, students, teachers, I can't really show it on camera because with the amount that I would have to cover up, it would be kind of very difficult to see anyways. I had already known that by very, very carefully planning out my day for work, I could make my work day and my school year much more efficient, effective, and just pleasant. What stationery taught me, and getting into this hobby, is that I can apply that same energy into my personal life. And so, by getting my very first weeks in December of last year, I learned that I can take the energy that I put towards school planning and also put it towards my personal planning. And so, having used my weeks now every week for almost an entire year, it has been so amazing to be able to remember important events, to put down to-dos for each day, overarching to-dos for the week, to track the things that I want to track that I think are important, and to also just kind of have a highlight of the day that I also put in here has been so helpful to keeping my personal life much more organized. I love to be able to ensure that I know exactly what's going on, and while I may have been able to keep that in my mind earlier, as I've gotten older, as my job has gotten more intense, moving from teaching in my classroom to being an administrator, to now also being married and having, a household of two to think about. There's just so many other things floating around in the ether, and having a personal planner to write it all down and to track has been immensely, immensely helpful. And so I think the first lesson has definitely been about how having a system to keep myself organized has made my life much more organized and much more efficient. And it has been such an amazing tool to be able to take what I thought was just something for work and use stationery to make it happen for my personal life. And I think as somebody who likes analog systems, the Hobonichi Weeks has been so, so great, especially because I love the paper, I love how compact it is. I never would have thought to have a planner, I guess, for my personal life, only because I thought it had to be a giant 8.5 by 11 planner. Like, it didn't even cross my mind that smaller things existed, smaller systems, and the Hobonichi Weeks ended up being such a perfect fit for the needs that I had in my personal life. The second lesson that I've learned is that stationery has allowed me and has taught me to be so much more creative in my day-to-day life. And while I know that there is a lot of debate as to what is journaling versus scrapbooking versus junk journaling, and I know that if I'm using the term very, very loose, I enjoy the type of junk journaling that I do. If I use the term a much more narrow term, I enjoy the type of scrapbooking that I do in my journal. It has allowed me to take an aspect of my personality that loves to doodle, loves to play with markers, loves to, write in cursive, in different inks. Well, in what at the time were ballpoint or gel inks, but now, having been expanded into different fountain pens and fountain pen inks and all kinds of different pens and markers, it has allowed me to just really explore an aspect of my life that I had always enjoyed, but put it towards a more, serious purpose. And so being able to use my journals, like my New York City travel journal, to kind of document what's going on, while also being able to cut out paper, tear paper, glue things in, use markers, different pens in different ways, has really, really allowed me to have a vehicle to express myself in a way that, I didn't get to in years past. I think as a classroom teacher, this is where this part of myself did get to be expressed in decorating my classroom. I always put a lot of effort in creating beautiful bulletin boards and wall displays and making sure my classroom library had really artistic things, scattered throughout, photo frames of different mixed media art I would make for the classroom. Things that, could have just been a normal poster written and then put on the wall. I would put like a fun torn paper border, all sorts of things that I now realize are just an aspect of my personality, somebody who likes to express themselves creatively. But when I moved to administration, there was a lot less of an opportunity for me to be able to do that because I don't have a classroom. And while I do get to decorate parts of the school or be, involved in different school-wide events, I'm not on the daily expressing myself through the materials that I present to students. And so I think it was such a beautiful gift that the stationery hobby has given to me, to be able to allow me to have a place to creatively express myself once again through this kind of junk journaling, collaging, scrapbooking, whatever term you want to give for it, has really allowed myself to tap into a part of my personality and my, joy that was kind of not necessarily non-existent, but definitely tampered down since I took on a more administrative role at school. And so I think the second lesson for sure that stationery has taught me is that I am a creative person and I love to express myself in a creative way, and I get the conduit or the outlet to do it now on a daily basis. The third lesson that stationery has taught me is how much I enjoy learning and documenting that learning. What I think that is so unique about being in the stationery hobby is that it made me realize that not only do I like learning, but writing it down, collecting knowledge is also something that I find so satisfying. Getting into this community and in this hobby where I realized there are many different ways that I could be exploring the knowledge that I'm bringing in and processing it using paper and pencil or paper and pen has been such an enriching experience for myself. Having my reading journal, for example, where I can go through and just write down my thoughts about the books that I'm reading, has been such a lovely experience, especially being in a book club. It allows me to have that knowledge or quotes or information I want to refer back to right on the edge of my fingertips, to starting a commonplace notebook and even learning what a commonplace notebook was and kind of thinking, oh yeah, I learn information all the time and I'm always have wished that there was a place to put it. And yes, I don't know why it didn't come across in my mind to just grab a notebook off the shelf and write those things down. But to have it solidified in a system for me and to be able to have a place where when I'm like, I actually want to gather a little more information about X topic, I can pick up my commonplace book off the shelf and write it down and have those quotes, have that knowledge, have that information right at my fingertips to refer back to has been really, really amazing. And I think also enriching in the fact that I'm much more likely to remember this information because I have written it down. Just like I tell my students, and just like now we work with teachers to get them to understand that note-taking is such an important aspect of the process of learning. It's a way that where we interact with the knowledge being given to us. It's so exciting to have a place for me to be able to do that for myself, sitting on a shelf in my office whenever I want to pick it up. And lastly, to even be realizing that I can still create a curriculum for myself. And it doesn't just have to be, hey, here's random knowledge that I'm picking up, but what do I want to keep learning as an adult, and how can I create a plan for myself for that to happen, and how can I use stationery to enact that plan? And it's been so exciting to have this personal curriculum that I've been working on in this fall to winter end of the year about poetry, writing poems, getting really inspired by the different texts that I picked myself to read and different poets that I've been studying. And it's been really, really nice to be able to use stationery as a conduit to do that. And so definitely my big third lesson I've learned is that I am always going to be a learner, and it's even more fun to be a learner who has a place to document that learning. And so it has been a lovely gift that starting in the stationery hobby that I have picked up on, and it's so wonderful because it also gives me a purpose for all of those notebooks as an English teacher that you kind of collect or are given. You now are like, oh, well, I can do this to use it for X purpose, and it's been really, really wonderful. The fourth lesson that my stationery hobby has taught me is not as concrete or grounded in a physical object as perhaps the first three are, but I think the lesson that I have learned is to be patient and to be mindful. And I think a great example of one of the things that has taught me that in the stationery community or hobby is my use of fountain pens. I had never used a fountain pen before I got into this hobby. And in fact, like many people, I'm sure there is a planner or journal to fun gel pen to fountain pen pipeline. And once I started thinking about, using my daily journal and having my different notebooks, I saw people using fountain pens and I was like, quite interesting. I am also interested in this as well. And I think what had turned me off when I was younger is I had grabbed a calligraphy pen and tried to use it, and not knowing how to use it properly found it difficult to write with. And then I thought, oh, well, these are what fountain pens are, so I'm just not into that. And so it seemed so funny to me that somebody who had had such very specific opinions about the kinds of gel or ballpoint ink pens that I had used in my life up until now, that I had never tried to reignite an interest in fountain pens until this past year. And the reason I think that this is an example of how I've learned about mindfulness and patience is that jumping into the fountain pen community is a very, very deep pool of different kinds of pens, nibs, nib grinds, fountain pen ink. Even in the ink, the different kinds of ink, more wet, more dry, archival, all kinds of different ink. And the excitement of getting into it makes you want to just gather up all of the things like a dragon with a horde underneath you. And I had to learn how to be patient after I made some purchases that I realized weren't actually really helpful to me. And so, like other things in my stationery hobby have taught me, fountain pens are a great example of how I needed to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and really get to learn more information before I just give myself into the fervor. I know that there's a lot of conversation lately about overconsumption in the stationery community or hobby, and I think that that is a conversation that is very valid and has been really interesting. And I see both sides to, the coin of perhaps we shouldn't be promoting having so many things. And then other people saying, if it's within your means and it's not hurting anyone, this, is what brings you joy. I think that there probably is a happy medium to both sides of the argument that one could exist in. And the fountain pens and other aspects of my stationery hobby have definitely taught me to be mindful of are you getting something because you need it, or is it just that it makes you really excited, or you're just, super into the idea of having X thing, even though you may not have a purpose for it. And I've learned a lot about the kinds of pens I like, the different nib sizes I enjoy, and those weren't things I was taking into consideration when I started diving in on my first couple of pens and ink purchases. And so it's something that learning that sense of patience and really thinking and being mindful, well, what exactly do I enjoy about different pens? What do I want to use it for? How many pens am I actually going to be using at one time? And asking myself those questions and really getting myself to understand what I need and what I desire and what I actually will use has been really, really helpful in this hobby. I'm thankful, again, for this hobby to have helped me really connect with that part of myself, to be more mindful and to be more patient when it comes to things. And I really appreciate that lesson that I've picked up. The fifth lesson that stationery and the stationery hobby has taught me is that stationery is a universal language. I learned this pretty early on. In February of this year, I took a trip to Spain, and it was so amazing to be kind of in the, primordial creation or primordial stages of my stationery hobby, and to have traveled to a foreign country and to look up, well, where are the stationery stores in this city, and to be able to pop in and to talk to people about the different pens and things that they had. I know when I was in Madrid, I went to the stationery store, I believe it's Paperería de Bod, which is this stationery shop that's right across from the Temple of Debod in this public park. And I picked up this Kaweco Sport pen. It's an Orangina color, which is a colorway that was one you could buy in Spain, and they had one still available. And it was really, really amazing to be in a foreign country. Thankfully I do speak Spanish, but to, different customs, different ways of doing things. But I could walk into the shop and instantly connect with someone over, the Kaweco pens, and did you have this color, and what kind of inks are available in Spain that aren't available in other countries, and to have them show me a swatch book, and to just get down into the fun conversations that stationery people have about the different things they enjoy. And even though it's a completely different nation, it almost felt like I could be in the stationery store at any city here in America, as far as the conversations and the community are concerned. And I think that's something that I have learned, and why I say it's universal language, because people in this community, regardless of where they are, regardless if it's online or in person, they have such a passion for all of the things stationery related, and they're so happy to, one, talk about it, two, share of the resources they have, and three, teach you if you don't understand something immediately. It may seem odd because I am on a YouTube channel, but I am not exactly a, super extroverted personality by nature. I, am very sociable with people that I know well, or with people who I think have a common interest. And so I think that is why the stationery community has been so lovely, because there's an entry point for all of us. Like, we all know we like these certain items and these certain conversations, and to talk about paper and pens. And so we are ready to look at someone, say hello, and dive right in. And it's been so wonderful when that is not an experience I usually have when traveling into a new space. I think that whether I have been able to use my stationery to enrich already social interactions that I have, like this traveler's notebook that I created for my Dungeons and Dragon campaign that I have done with friends, creating a piece of stationery that has allowed me to enhance an already social experience that I have with other people, or whether it's been stationery events hosted at local stores or community spaces that I've gotten to document in my stationery, memory notebook. And so whether it's been being able to be at Yaseka for an event like Tono and Lim's Spacewalk, or for the Hobonichi preview, or for Urushi Pen seminars, it's a lovely way to find other people in the community, connect in person with them, and talk about the things that interest you and make you excited about items in the stationery community. And it has been so wonderful to be able to meet people at these events, to take part in things like Stationery Store Day, go to other shops in the city, and talk to the people who run the store and other people who are at the events, and just connect, give each other Instagram handles, talk about upcoming events. As I mentioned in my previous video, the only reason I knew to go to the Pelican Hub was because at this Tono and Lim's Spacewalk event, I met somebody in the line, and while we were messaging on Instagram after, she mentioned, "Oh, do you know about the Pelican Hub and the Empire Pen Show coming up?" And it was so lovely to be able to connect and to be able to create a community of people who have a similar interest, and then, keep in touch and start building this lovely community here in the city. But I think what's even more impressive is that this community exists not only in person, if you have access to a shop or you're near a place where there are multiple shops or events that happen, but also on the internet. I've been so lucky that early on in my exploration of stationery, I joined Post Crossing, which is a postcard swapping website, and also on Reddit, the Random Acts of Cards or Random Acts of Happy Mail subreddits, where I've been able to exchange ephemera, stickers, other things with people, just by the nature of posting on those Reddit boards and discussing the different things about stationery we enjoy. Through Random Acts of Cards and Post-Crossing, I've been able to send so many pieces and receive so many pieces of Happy Mail through postcards that I've been collecting here in this photo album, and people who just send a simple message of hello, who send you their own digital or physical artwork, people who write you, longer form letters that have turned into almost pen pal-like relationships. It's been so amazing to be able to connect with these people and to form a community simply because we like sending physical mail and writing on paper and decorating a postcard with some washi and some markers, or to send a card with an envelope full of little samples. And I already kind of touched on this a little bit in my last video, but I'm just so astonished by the wonderful community that forms around people who enjoy stationery and stationery related things within the hobby as a whole. And I am so excited that one of the lessons I learned is that stationery is a universal language, and that everyone who enjoys stationery can come together and enjoy something that they love with people who have similar interests, and who at the end of the day are like a little stationery family, whether you see each other multiple times at those events or you bump into each other for the first time. The stationery community brings people together into a place where you just feel the quick, fast friends, and it even continues outside of that realm. And it's just been so lovely to be able to meet people, connect with them, to create journaling groups with individuals, or to join big journaling groups that meet monthly. It's just such a treasure, and it's such a wonderful lesson I have learned. The last lesson I've learned from my stationery hobby this year is that my brain is just much happier because of stationery. And I know that that is probably due in part to the ability to create community, like I've already said, to be able to express myself creatively, to be able to do all of the things, and to learn the previous 5 lessons that I've learned from this hobby. But I think at its core, I've learned that my brain can be much happier simply by, if I pare it down to the most simple form of what I've done in this stationery hobby, is my daily journal. To be able to sit down every day and to write my thoughts down has been so helpful to creating a more clear mind and a more focused point of view on the events that have happened, how I feel about them, to process those feelings, to realize what's valid and what perhaps I need to rethink as I file away what's my takeaway from the day. And journaling has been a way for me to do that. Part of the reason I started this hobby was, again, after seeing those videos from Helen and the Coffee Monster Co., the thing that really stuck with me wasn't the planning aspect of what she did, although it was beautiful, but the fact that she journaled every day in her Hobonichi cousin fascinated me. And as someone who has always wanted to be a person who journaled, it didn't ever occur to me that journaling was more than just writing down words on the paper, although if that's the way that you journal, it's also completely valid. But my brain didn't realize that I could be journaling and using ephemera and drawing things inside of the notebook all at the same time. And so, seeing that kind of journaling happening every day, I realized moving into 2025, I wanted to be able to have a routine where I would do something before I went to bed that wasn't staring at my phone, doom scrolling, especially in the volatile political climate that we have in the United States, and I knew that we were barreling towards at that time in early December, right after the election. I wanted to have a place to just decompress my thoughts, to make a cup of tea every night, to put a candle under the candle warmer, and sit down and just plan a spread and write my feelings out. Doing that every night for this last year has been immensely, immensely helpful to making my brain a happier place to be. With the stress of work, with the interesting and new experience of being married for the first time, to starting this hobby, and then the connections and the different events and things that came from it, and then just the regular ups and downs of life, I got to record all of those things here in this journal. And while some days, I've been too tired to write much, and other days I wish I had more space, I know that everything I've done in here has been so helpful to have me reflect and to think about what's gone on in my day. And when I look back over the year of entries that I have, it's fascinating to see how my perspective has changed, how my thoughts and feelings about myself, about others, about the stresses in my life have fluctuated, and almost to also see how I begin to have almost a dialogue with the journal itself about how it's a partner in my processing of these feelings and emotions. I cannot, again, stress enough how helpful this has been to my mental health this year and to my thinking. And ultimately, what has made my brain a happier place is the fact that I get to have this space to mess around with my thoughts on paper, and I'm so thankful for it, and so thankful that I began this hobby, tradition, this routine every day for this year in 2025. That brings us to the end of this video. I want to thank you so much for staying with me to reflect on these 6 lessons that my stationery hobby has taught me over this past year of journaling, planning, scrapbooking, junk journaling, community events, all the different things that have come along with this hobby, and what they have taught me has been immensely important, and I really appreciate you being here to talk about that with me. Another thing I would like to do as a way to celebrate the stationery community that I've mentioned in this video and in my last one, and again for this channel hitting 1,000 subscribers, is to do a bit of a giveaway of some extra ephemera, washi tape samples, and other bits and bobs that are related to the stationery community to someone who is watching this video today. So if you would like to be entered into the giveaway, please comment below, and you can comment with your favorite stationery related emoji and let me know what lessons you've learned from your own journaling practice or from being involved with stationery in whatever way you are. I look forward to seeing all the different ways and different lessons that you've learned from this hobby in the comments as well. I want to thank you again for being here, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day, whether that's just a few minutes before you turn off the lights and go to bed, or a full day ahead of you with all of the different things you have to experience. I hope that it's great. Until next time, keep exploring the possibilities that a blank page can bring you. Bye-bye.